sister's a therapist and I tell jokes. We both want to help all kinds of folks.
Hello, and welcome to My Sister's a Therapist. This is a podcast between two sisters, betwixt two sisters, one of whom is a comedy witch and one of whom is a regular witch. I thought it sounded like the weird sisters in Macbeth. We are two sisters. We will tell you your future, your past, and your present. My name is Virginia Jones, and I'm a stand-up comedian. I do this podcast with my sister, Laura Ryan, LMFT.
Hello, I'm Laura Ryan. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, but my main credit is sister to modern marvel of monkey shines, Virginia Jones.
Thank you very much. I would like to announce that my sister, Laura Ryan, has just broken 1,600 subscribers on TikTok. Congratulations.
I would like to thank the little people for this important
Has an
announcement.
almost entirely leprechaun following.
Yes, I mostly have Darby O'Gill and his followers.
But you know what? The downloads eat the same.
Virginia and everyone else listening, if you really like this show, tell somebody. Tell a stranger, tell a person in the next porta potty, tell a friend at the hairdresser's that you like our podcast. Also, get on the internet. Tell a few people on Spotify, Apple, YouTube.
Go home, cut a pillowcase into strips, write My Sister's a Therapist podcast, go to the dog park and tie them to dogs' collars. See what happens. Maybe we'll get a lot of dog owners. If you are a fan of the podcast, we would love for you to review our podcast, and you can do it any of the places Laura described. Drop us a review and we'll make you famous for a week. Laura, on this podcast, we each take turns researching a topic and presenting it to the other one, who is surprised, sometimes pleasantly, sometimes not, to receive the information. I've been sitting at the edge of my seat for a week straight, wondering what our topic is this week. Laura, what is our topic?
Our topic is Scott Galloway. Are you familiar with Scott Galloway?
I'm going to be learning a lot.
I'm going to play a clip from Scott Galloway. He's been hitting the internet. He was recently on The Daily Show, and I got in a big fight with a man, well, several men actually, about him. So here's a clip.
When you ask a man if you could have a woman who had 80% of everything you wanted, 75% say, yeah, I'm on board.
Mm-hmm.
When you say to a woman, a man has 80% of what you want, 75% say that's not enough.
Let's talk about Scott.
Where did those numbers come from? Out of his bottom?
It's an aperitif of the Scott. We're going to hear all kinds of great quotes. Scott Galloway is a professor of marketing at NYU Stern School of Business, where he teaches brand strategy and digital marketing to second-year MBA students and is the author of the Digital IQ Index. In 2012, he was named one of the world's best business school professors. You might ask yourself, why does a man whose expertise in marketing, why is he constantly talking about what women should be doing? So I've sent you an article.
I think the short answer is this is what gets clicks. You don't get clicks talking about business and marketing. You get clicks talking about what women are doing that is bad. Scott Galloway says, one signal that as a man, you have become almost near unsavable, that's just bad writing, is when you start blaming women for your romantic problems or blaming immigrants for your economic problems. There's an understandable gag reflex when people like me started talking about the struggles of young men. I was called Andrew Tate with an MBA. That's not a compliment. To the far right's credit, they recognized the problem before anyone else, but their answer was to take us back to the 50s when non-whites and women had less opportunity, and they incorrectly correlated the ascent of women with the descent of men. That is not true. There's a lot of meat on the bone there. No, rising women up does not push men down. This is not a zero-sum problem. However, when women are working hard and having more opportunities, looking around at what men are available and seeing the men are not graduating college at the same rate, not having the same opportunities, women, for the most part, do not want to date down.
In any sense, most women don't want to date down. Here's some quotes from Notes on Being a Man by Scott Galloway. The more no's they get, the more they can calibrate what works and what doesn't. The key, the skill, the talent, the mastery, the ninja artisanship no one teaches is that the greatest, most specific skill a young man can develop is his willingness to endure rejection. I agree with that. The ultimate goal for any male is to create what the author of Boys and Men, Richard Reeves, my Yoda on this subject, calls surplus value. This phrase shows up a lot in these pages. It means you give a lot more than you get. For men, this means providing more love to others than was given to you, becoming a better son, brother, friend, or employer to people. Your job if you become a father is to create a surplus value as measured by being a better dad than your dad was to you. We see and we continue to create a generation of young men from all backgrounds who are unbearably lonely.
I see the wisdom of all of that. And I also see the wisdom of trying to be of service to your wife and to your children.
This is why I think of Scott as a very controversial figure. A lot of the things he says, I'm totally on board with.
Right.
I agree that men should be making an effort to be an invaluable person in a woman's life, to give and not to just take.
One of my friends was showing off to our chat group yesterday because she flies a lot and has a lot of miles. She got an upgrade offered to her, but it was a trip she was taking with her husband. Because he wasn't able to sit in first class, she turned it down. And she actually offered him the first class seat because he was wedged in the middle. She was trying to be nice. Another of the women on the chat said, the way I love my boyfriend, but I would never do that. I think that attitude of always trying to overserve the other person, if you're both doing it, that's the key to a good relationship.
If you're both doing it. If you're both thinking about the other person more than you're thinking about yourself, that's a good thing.
If the roles were reversed, he 100% would have given her the first class seat.
Based on what I know of this man, that does feel true.
To your point that you like some things he says and they make sense, and then other things make you incredibly angry. I think that's something we need to embrace. People are not all one thing or all another thing. I do think that when we politicize every human on earth and try to put them in a box, we're missing out on some good stuff. I think that it's okay to find someone that some of their ideas you find interesting and some of them you find not interesting. I really hate the way he talks about himself.
Yes.
One of the semi-exciting perks of being an academic and quote thought leader, are people saying thought leader, Scott, is uncovering data, especially when it's both obvious and hidden. Years ago, the alarming state of American boys and men overtook my attention. I track closely the emails I get. Most are from parents, particularly mothers concerned about their sons along these lines. I have a daughter who lives in Chicago and works in PR and another daughter who's at Penn.
My son lives in our basement, vapes, and plays video games. Moms, not dads, were leading the charge. Others were either ignoring the problem or didn't want to talk about it. Absent, too, was any sober, data-driven analysis. The gag reflex cultural response seems to be, wow, men are worse than we think, and that the issues they face are a function of their awfulness. And haven't we spent the last 40 years correctly focusing on the struggles of other, more deserving groups?
But the reason I think that men are struggling now is that they have always been given special treatment. And the second any of that is taken away, they fall to the floor. They haven't had to be any better than they are.
Have you seen the cartoon? It's a bunch of people standing in front of a fence. You can see that there's different ethnic groups, different genders, but the white male has a bunch of boxes that he's standing on top of. That's how he's seeing over the right? When you start kicking out the boxes, stuff gets weird. This is what he says. First, boys face an educational system biased against them. With brains that mature later than girls, they almost immediately fall behind their female classmates. Bro, who made the system of school? Right. Who developed that? Was it women? I'm pretty sure women weren't allowed to be in school for a pretty long time.
And it's not biased against men. Male students are still given so much privilege in the classroom because of the society we live in. If men are failing out of school, it's not because they're not getting enough attention, enough encouragement. There's other factors at work. For years and years, I always had my hand in the air. I thought I was being a good student. I was probably just aggravating the crap out of everybody. I realize that now. But I was never considered the smart kid in class. It was always some dude. I was never considered a leader. It was always some dude. I'm very resistant to the idea that it's the educational system that is working against boys, or at least white boys. Many grow up without male role models, including teachers. Fewer men teach K to 12 than there are women working in STEM fields. Do you know why that is?
I think it's because we hate men.
It's because it doesn't pay anything. There's no respect given to teachers. It's not that there's barriers keeping men out of teaching K to 12, with Black and Hispanic school instructors especially underrepresented. 45% of men ages 18 to 25 have never approached a woman in person. And without the guardrails of a relationship, young men have to behave as if they have no guardrails. If we can't convince young men of the honor involved in the unique contributions inherent in expressing what makes them male, we'll lose them to niche, rabid online communities. This has got so much gobbledygook in it. Men of honor.
Women are guardrails. Let's try that out. If I go bowling and you
Right.
put those things up at the side, that's what my job is as a woman, is to make sure some guy stays on the path and doesn't become a school shooter. How is that my job?
It's always been our job.
This is an excerpt from the Jordan Harbinger show. Jordan Harbinger says, while women are rightfully making incredible advancements, a whole bunch of young men are quietly sinking or loudly sinking. Today's conversation is not about playing whose life is harder. This is about what happens when half the population gets written off and what it means for societies, families, relationships, and the dudes out there trying their best not to get crushed by student loans.
Do you think that men are the only people who have student loans, Laura?
I think their loans are more expensive than mine.
Women have some sort of chick scholarship. You're a woman, so you don't have to take out student loans.
You didn't get one of those with your FAFSA?
Well, shoot.
I did. They said, oh, you have boobs. You're going to pay half of what all the men are paying.
And that's what FAFSA stands for, Female Appearing Frontal Scholarship Association.
Going to college was girls drink free. That's kind of what it was like for me.
Every Tuesday and Wednesday, we got free classes. Sure, we had to pay for Monday and Thursday and Friday, but we got a big discount.
We also got BOGO for our textbooks, which was great. And I guess the guys didn't get that too.
That does seem unfair. And also, women aren't going to continue to flourish as long as men are failing. Generally, what I'm finding is who wants more economically and emotionally viable men? So a lot of feminists will push back and say, where were you when we were struggling? I would argue a lot of us men were there for them. Okay, where? When? Show me something. Show me anything to show me that straight white men were there for women.
They were sometimes holding the door when they let you into a restaurant or establishment.
That's true. Sometimes they would buy you a drink and not drug it.
Occasionally.
If you look at the big thing that kind of inspired the increase in female attendance in college, it used to be 40 to 60 in 1973 when Title IX was passed. Now, by the way, it's 60-40. And in terms of graduation, it's probably closer to 66 or 2-1. He's arguing that the reason women have stayed in college is because we were allowed to go to college. Title IX was a civil rights law that prohibited sex-based discrimination. You were not able to accept people at a greater rate for being male. We've been talking a lot about DEI as a culture, especially the big colleges have been required to scrub their DEI. And the first thing that has happened is that white men are getting into college less. What DEI means is that you are not looking at the racial background. You're not looking at economic limitations, cultural stuff. You are just looking at test scores. And guess whose test scores are not great? White men. I don't know if that worked out the way we thought.
There's no discussion of a Title IX for men, nor should there be. But if you look at when Title IX was passed, 97% of our elected officials were men. Throughout society, the most unsustainable, violent nations and periods in history have all had one thing in common, that there's a disproportionate number of young men without economic or romantic opportunities. I mean, whether it was Hitler weaponizing them or the Islamic Republic, when you have a lot of young men who don't have access to economic or mating opportunities, they get frustrated, they get violent, and they're prone to nationalist content or misogynist content telling them that's not your fault and we need to go after the enemy.
I love the phrase mating opportunities. Why don't we have a straight pride parade?
That's what I'm wondering. It ends up that girls are much more resilient and much stronger than men. And they don't know if it's because throughout history, women have had to figure out a way to endure menstruation or childbirth, or quite frankly, they have had to endure much more hardship. No kidding, bro.
Welcome to the world. I have this opinion, and I have it pretty loudly, that women who have been in comedy for 10 years versus men who have been in comedy for 10 years are much funnier, almost with no exception, because we don't get the same opportunities as men. We have to be exceptional in order to move forward. That's not sexism. That's just calling it like I sees it, bro.
The time when the Czech people were the most oppressed was the time where they made the best work. I feel like being oppressed does make you try harder, does make you work harder, and does make you feel more passionate. When you haven't had a right to something, you fight harder and harder to get it. And I think that makes you better. It's that turning coal into diamonds kind of thing.
Generally, it's said that the best punk rock music was during the Reagan era, when the dominant culture is oppressive and you have to figure out ways to succeed. You are going to work a little harder. You're going to show up. The interviewer says, there's just no doubt getting around it. Girls are stronger than boys. I mean, I can see that. And Scott says, my dad had a second family. Oh, okay. That's why you're here. And I was that second family. My primary role model after my dad left was a guy who lived in Arizona, had a wife and son and a thriving business and a strong family.
And every other weekend, he spent time with me and my mom. My mom was the other woman, and I was the son of that other woman. So that was my primary male role model. And the initial kind of knee-jerk reaction is, wow, that's a bad man. And that's not true. He was actually a good man. He was very good to me.
He's just a man who's showing you that operating without integrity, without honesty, without honor is a good way to be. And you've internalized that stuff. Great.
He was good.
There's a duality to people. The fact that this man was kind to you doesn't negate the unkindness he was displaying to his wife and his first family.
And also the unkindness he was displaying to your mother. That's not great.
Yeah. I did see a TikTok of a woman who got invited to her husband's wedding, but they're married. They're not separated. They're not in process of anything. They're just regular married. She showed up to say, I do have a problem with this marriage. I am married to him right now. And it was his fourth marriage. He just changed his name, would leave old wife. He did it in the wrong order, I would say. You should leave old wife before you get remarried. He just liked marrying people.
Okay, but that's not legal.
No, it's not. And then that marriage he was going to get got canceled. And then his existing marriage was canceled. And then she found all these other women who'd also been married and left by this guy.
So the good news is that guy is single.
The thing we need in our society is more of a gestalt of apprenticeship, mentorship, and immediately getting men involved in the life of a boy when he doesn't have a lot of male role models. 1 out of 3 men under the age of 25 is living at home. That's also bad math because 1 out of 3 men under 25 are under the age of 18. That's a bad statistic. 1 out of 5 men at the age of 30 is living at home. Only 1 out of 3 men under the age of 30 is in a relationship, whereas it's 2 and 3 women under the age of 30 in a relationship. And you think that's mathematically impossible. If a guy hasn't cohabitated with someone else or been married by the time he's 30, there's 1 in 3 chance he's going to be a substance abuser. It used to be a commonly said thing that if a woman hadn't married by the time she was 30, she was broken and should not be considered as a mate. I feel that way about men as well. If you haven't had something serious, by the time there's a 3 and an O in your age, you're toast. I'm not going to raise a baby.
You're toast.
You're cooked, bro.
Give up. You're chopped. Let me just throw this out there because you're thinking, well, that's statistically impossible. If all the women are married at that age, who are they married to? Fun fact, Scott Galloway's 61 years old. Guess how old his wife is?
Oh, is she 40?
She's 45.
Nice. You can't tell women to lower their expectations, but this is the reality. When you ask a man if you could have a woman who had 80% of everything you wanted, 75% say, yeah, I'm on board. When you say to a woman, a man has 80% of what you want, 75% say that's not enough. But even look at the media. What does the media tell a woman to do? He's out, but he didn't open your door. He's not nice to his parents. Walk right out on that man. Like literally every piece of media is you don't need him. But this is a reaction to every piece of media up until this point being, well, but you should stay with him. You should understand. He got drunk and made a mistake. He hit you or he slept with someone else. Well, you need to stand by your man like Timmy Wynette, who did not stand by her man, by the way. Every part of our culture is saying, hey, women have been tricked into staying with men who are not worth anything, who are not improving their lives, and in fact are making their lives worse. That's normal. That's normal that's the reaction.
If you're asking a man, you can have 80% of everything you want. What does that mean? Do you mean big boobs, blonde hair, and sounds like a child? I think the difference is that women have actual standards often, and men, all of their standards are just based on appearance. When I don't care what your personality is like, it's really easy for me to just say, oh yeah, a woman. I don't care what your income is. I don't care what your personality is like. The pool is a lot bigger when you don't have any standards besides appearance. Not all men.
I'm going to say from a scientific perspective, this statement that 75% of men will go for a woman who has 80% of what he wants, but 75% of women won't, is nonsense. There is no study that has determined this. And when you look up this thing, 80% of what a man wants, do you know who comes up? Is Scott Galloway. He's just made it up.
He probably heard it at a barbecue from friends.
There could not be scientific data. There's too many variables in the question.
Which is funny to me because he's a business professor. This is from F the Nice Guy podcast. Every time I see Scott Galloway, I just want to remind him, you're a marketing expert. Why do you consistently force yourself into this conversation? I know if you give a mouse a cookie, he probably wants a glass of milk. Apparently, if you give a man a microphone, he's definitely going to tell women how to live their lives.
The core problem here is women feel free to be alone for the first time in their lives. That having a mediocre partner that doesn't meet their needs is not better than not having a partner at all. And what are the standards? If a woman's list is that the man is trustworthy, that he's kind, that he's compassionate, those might be deal breakers. But if the guy's list is 5'2", size 2 with double Ds, I think he might be more willing to let that go. I love when they start a video like, I'm not saying women should lower their standards, but let me talk for 3 minutes about why really you should. Because they think that being alone for a woman is the worst thing. Because they know that being alone for themselves is the worst thing.
Yeah, because they make lousy friends.
They're speaking from their own position. Our position is if I'm going to be with a man who is a drain on my finances, is a drain on me emotionally, who is abusive to me, who is unfaithful to me, I'd rather be with no one at all. And these guys are standing out in the street going, that's not fair.
I saw a TikTok where this woman decided just for funsies to figure out if cohabiting with her boyfriend was actually saving her anything. And she found out after living with him for 2 years and comparing it to her single expenditures that she had saved an average of $3.84 a month.
And one woman presented her findings that she didn't save anything. Splitting rent in half, her food bill went up and her electricity bill went up. And a lot of her general expenses went up.
Our water bill didn't. Because as you all know,
They
men
don't
don't
bathe.
bathe.
The arguments, if a woman doesn't get out there and choose a man, he's going to be more likely to fall into a right-wing conservative neo-Nazi cult. That's not a compelling pro argument. If I wasn't with him, he would be shooting innocent people. I don't think I want to be with him.
I don't want to be with someone who is potentially going to be shooting up a school. That's not someone who I should spend time with. I know that you like non-data driven facts, right?
That's my favorite. Just get on a microphone and tell me what you're feeling.
Scott Galloway says a man of average attractiveness has to swipe right 200 times to get one coffee. Then 4 or 5 of those coffee dates will just ghost him. They will decide that they don't want to meet with him or they won't show up. That means a guy of average attractiveness has to swipe right 1,000 times to get one coffee. Now, what does that tell the guy? Women don't value me. Women make me feel rejected. And then they go online and they meet. They see these misogynists telling them, and these men become much more prone to misogynistic content, much more prone to nationalistic content, blaming other people for their lack of economic opportunity.
Let's scrub that a little bit. The reason that men are swiping so many times and being rejected so much is that 80% of men are competing for the top 20% most attractive women. Women over the years have developed the ability to see potential in a man who might not be super attractive, who might not be super fit, who might not be everything that she's looking for, but she's willing to go on a date and chance it. If men are swiping for attractiveness, they're going to be in heavy competition. Women have been known to date unattractive people. Look around you. How many women that you know are dating someone who's better looking than they are?
If I'm looking at my past relationships, I don't think I've ever dated anyone who's more attractive than me because I'm basically Cindy Crawford on very short legs.
They really like to bang this drum. It's not fair that women aren't interested in them. Become someone that women are interested in and be more broad-minded when it comes to your swiping. Maybe look at some substance. Do we have some hobbies in common? Does she seem like someone who'd be fun for me to talk to? Otherwise, you're just going to be like a crab in a pit fighting it out over 20% of women while 80% of women are sitting at home lonely just like you. This is from the F the Nice Guy podcast. It's literally him on here being like, I read something somewhere. He has no expertise in this area, but let's talk about the thing he read somewhere. Number one, love the way he delivered it like it was earth shattering. They have to swipe hundreds of times to get one coffee. Many a time in a public space, I have seen men literally like rapid fire going through profiles, not reading it, barely glimpsing the image and just saying, yes, yes, yes. They swipe on every woman. And then when they get a swipe back, that's when they edit. And that's very hurtful because then you know he didn't look at me or like me at all. He was just waiting to make the big call. I was talking to someone I know recently. They were someone who was seeking partners who were open to his being in a poly relationship. And he said, I talked to a lot of people, but very few people met me out for coffee. It was important to me that I be really honest about what I was looking for. If someone calls you on the phone and says, if you show up on this day at this time, you could win a car, you'd be pretty likely to show up just to see what happened. You're not being guaranteed that you're going to win a car, but it's a possibility. If someone calls you and says, if you show up at this day at this time, you could win a ride in a car, you probably won't bother.
She also says, I think the biggest problem with these conversations is how they're framed, as though the systems and women are failing men. Who invented Tinder? Was it a woman? No. So if you don't like it, then blame your friend.
If you don't like it, get off of it. Go back to dating in the wild. Generation Z does not trust online dating at all because dating apps, as fun of an idea as it was, men just kept saying to each other, well, it's just a hookup app. If every man believes that it's a hookup app, then it becomes a hookup app. If every woman believes that it's a dating app and every man believes it's a hookup app, everyone's going to wind up disappointed.
I went on Tinder and I hooked up with no one. I was on there for years and years. I went on 5 dates with this guy. We never even kissed him. It's not a hookup app for me.
I went on one Tinder date. It didn't work out. And then I saw him when I was out with my partner a couple years later. And then he direct messages me and asked me if I wanted to hook up. Men who I did not hook up with later would go, hey, do you want to hook up now? Thank you so much for asking. No.
If I'd wanted to hook up with you, I would have done it then.
I think we do this with dating. I think we do this with the male loneliness epidemic. We frame it as though everything is failing men, as opposed to the fact that men are not adapting to modern day life. Women for centuries have had to mold themselves and adapt to the systems that men created to find some sort of success. Now that women are achieving it more than men, we are looking at it and saying, we're failing them. We're failing the men. We need to change something. And ultimately, I think that what the framing of these things looks like is if we're asking the women to change and adapt to where men are at, as opposed to asking men to change and adapt to the current systems. There's a lot of conversation about intelligence and what intelligence means and what it means to be smart. Dumb people think that being intelligent means remembering facts. Trivial Pursuit or Jeopardy is what smartness looks like for dumb people. Increasingly, I think that intelligence is adaptability, being able to change with the times. It used to be that all I needed was a high school degree and a car and I'd have a wife. That's not true anymore, bro.
We have to be like cockroaches. They've been around for billions of years because they adapt. For the same article, the economist Claudia Golden cited in certain research that she thinks the birth rate drop is partially due to the fact that men are not participating in the homes and they have not adapted. In modern day life, women these days are working full time. Scott Galloway is yet again running his mouth about things he is not an expert in. Professor Scott Galloway on our current gender divide and how to come together. That's funny, Scott, because you're a professor in marketing, but I digress.
When my grandpa met my grandma, she was 13 years old and working in her father's shop.
And he was 35.
He started coming every day and asking her out. And she said, no, I'm 13 years old. But he wore her down. And then they were happily married. Happily, according to who? Scott Galloway, our marketing expert, says the mating gap.
Our patron saint, Scott
Okay.
Galloway.
It's amazing how I had never heard of this man 45 minutes ago, and now I hate him. The mating gap. Women are outpacing men in education, income, and emotional maturity. Many women say there aren't any good men left. The truth, there aren't enough viable men for high-achieving women to date. If women were willing to date less educated men, there's no dating gap at all. Why does a woman with a graduate degree want to date someone with a community college degree?
Because there are a lot of truck drivers and a lot of them are men.
At first glance, this doesn't seem that bad, but what is the correction here? There aren't good men left? He's saying, no, there aren't enough viable men for high achieving women to date. And the difference is what? I'm guessing our perception of viable, but let's keep going. One challenge in dating is that women who are high achieving value a high achieving man, and men who are high achieving do not necessarily value a high achieving woman. Income may not be on their list at all. That means that the high achieving men are going to date younger, lower achieving women, and the high achieving women are stuck fighting over the same two guys. I think this is why Mr. Big had a chance with Carrie at all after rejecting her over and over again. She was looking around and saying, I'm a published author. I am a woman who is making the kind of living from a weekly advice column that furnishes me this beautiful New York apartment. And there's just not that many guys of my caliber out there available to date.
So Scott says, soon for every 2 college-educated women, there will be 1 college-educated man. Men 16 through 24 are 10% behind women in full-time income. Women want men with resources, but men are falling behind on every metric. Facts. What's actually attractive? This is Scott's formula for what women want.
Great.
Yes, please. Marketing major Scott Galloway, tell us what women want. The F the Nice Guy podcast really hates Scott Galloway. Signal future resources, not just money now, but discipline and drive. Intellect, the ability to make smart decisions. Kindness, how you treat people who can do nothing for you. The fact that you have to define it is quite frightening. Here's Scott's takeaway. You don't have to be rich. You need to show potential maturity and emotional generosity. And how many men have I ever dated who have those qualities?
You don't have to be rich to be my girl. You don't have to be cool to rule my world. Ain't no particular sign I'm more compatible with. I just need your extra time and your...
And also that you be 16 years old and I meet you at one of my concerts with your mom.
The paradigm that Scott is railing against, that women want a high earner, women want to be taken care of, is also a product of misogyny. The idea that men are born to be providers and women are born to be subservient moms, you're setting yourself up for failure. You're saying women only want these rich, powerful men, and I'm going to go sit in my mother's basement and suck eggs. If we were a more egalitarian society, you wouldn't have to take that place, but you would have to give up that women are going to be subservient to you, that women are going to serve all of your emotional needs, physical needs, and all of your house cleaning needs. Why not just everyone be people?
Why would I do that when I can manipulate a person and make them take care of me like I'm their child for the rest of time?
Start with a version of who you'd want to date. But having read all that, would you like to guess what Scott titled this series? I honestly cannot. Why modern dating is failing men, not just you. The system is broken, and here is why. Women who aren't in relationships, they pour that energy into their friends and their work. When a man doesn't have a relationship, he's alone. The word on the street is when a man doesn't have a relationship, he pours that energy into YouTube and video games and not into male friendships, not into his family, not into his church community. He sits at home and stews and says, why don't you like me? Why don't I deserve love?
I'm going to quote not a podcast, but a TikTok. Natalie Garrett-Woodruff says, I was just on a conference call with a group of people who were like, oh my God, Scott Galloway. And they were all saying, you're being really quiet. A man who refers to women in their 30s as cat women and women in their 50s as, quote, on pause, end quote, for menopause, he doesn't like women. If you can't think of any better way to refer to a woman of a certain age, then he doesn't like women.
As much as he's recently gotten criticism and he's trying to adapt his narrative, he's not wrong. It is dangerous that lonely dudes just fall further into the pit of incel basement dwellers. Women are not the fix. We are not the solution, because every time you propose this, well, we need to get men into relationships because then they're not dangerous. That's putting us, whether through our work or our sheer presence, in the position of having to fix what you broke. And also, women who are in relationships with men who are dangerous, they're in danger. I'm just supposed to step in front of the bullet for society? But he's right. This is where the manosphere kids come from. This is what's feeding Jordan Peterson and Andrew Tate. This is where they get their cannon fodder from.
Somewhere along the way, we got stuck back at the cave as you guys just wandered aimlessly, hoping to run into food. And through micro movements through the centuries, women started to notice that even when their caves were full of children and their husband, they were still alone. And every generation was thinking, maybe one day I won't have to be so lonely. And the next generation would say, maybe at some point, as a woman, I won't need to be this lonely. And it progressed to micro levels over thousands of years till we finally got to the point in the 1960s where enough women had finally learned that, you know what, they can stand on their own. Their brains are literally just as big and just as good as the boy. The laws kind of worked in our favor. We were allowed into education, we were allowed into the workplace, and we realized that we didn't need men. And collectively, the second we could drop you, we did.
The way that Natalie is reframing this is very passive. These laws appeared to help us. We were able to get work. That was the result of backbreaking work of the women before us.
I heard from Scott Galloway that he was helping.
A lot of men are helping. We're not giving enough credit to those men who were helping. No source, no data, just a gut feeling underneath your GD $25 Hager belt.
Do you know that Scott Galloway wears Hager belts?
I get a sense, and it's brown as well. It's a brown leather belt he's wearing, and I hate him. Also in my act, I say the first mistake that men made is letting us learn how to read, because I would be in your house raising your kids if I couldn't read and understand the signs to the main road. Speaking of the women who worked hard to get us where we are today, I saw TikTok. What we don't talk about when we talk about the suffragettes in England, who were widely mocked, jailed, just trying to get women's suffrage, voting rights for women. One of their big causes was they wanted to be able to vote against men marrying 12-year-olds. They thought that was bad.
What?
And the men were not standing up for us. Scott Galloway.
Scott was holding the door for those 12-year-olds who were about to get married.
He was telling them they looked pretty. So it doesn't mean that women don't get lonely. It doesn't mean that they don't yearn for a partner. To build the confidence to stand on their own, to claim ownership for their work. No, that's my DNA letter you stole, you a-holes, referring to Watson and Crick's theft of the concept of the DNA double helix, stolen from the analysis of Rosalind Franklin. We are finally at a place where we are rediscovering women's contributions to society and giving them the proper credit. It is no coincidence that we are in a place in our society where men are trying to get everything they can to roll us back to the last time they felt comfortable. If men are looking around and saying, I have less companionship, I have fewer opportunities to get married, ideally, what would happen, what I think should happen, is men try to become the people that are marryable. But instead, they're like, we want you to look for less.
We're not willing to rise to meet you. We want you to lower your standards. And there's Scott Galloway, who continues to hammer home the idea that women are the solution, women are the fix. And although he's just a guy, he's a guy of value because he has money in the bank. The stock market crashes. What value do you have in society, Scott? You know what women would choose? A deadbeat over a billionaire if the deadbeat was just decent. And that's how far we've let the bar slip. We would just like men to be decent. What he needs to do is start gathering men together. It needs to be on them to start their own classes to teach each other how to not be incels.
I don't think you understand, Laura, that Scott Galloway is a self-proclaimed thought leader.
Well, he's certainly leading me somewhere with his thoughts.
When you think about the practical application of this idea, any woman, take any man who wants you, you are one generation from divorce, spousal abuse, spousal abandonment, and you're just creating more fatherless children that you think are the problem to begin with. This is a cycle that you are perpetuating. If you're asking women to partner with men who don't meet their standards and who do not like women, it's not going to be an improvement.
This is where you're wrong. This is where we're taking away no-fault divorce.
That's true. If you figure out ways to make it impossible for women to leave men, make it impossible for women to terminate abortions, make it impossible for women to work, we will be going to someplace where you're more comfortable. I was reading some Women's Day magazines that came out from the year I was born. In the same week, I've seen a t-shirt ad where a woman is captioned as saying, I dreamt I was being sexually assaulted, and an article about what's wrong with birth control. And all of the reasons that were wrong with birth control is that women are stupid and lead with our emotions.
We don't know how to use birth control.
We feel bad about using it. We think that people think that we're whores if we use it. So we really have come a long way, baby. I'm not going back.
Although it feels like we haven't moved 1 inch in 100 years, we have made some traction.
If the only thing you do when you get together or alone in your mom's basement is get more hateful, you're already proving to us it is a losing equation. For every time he tries to seem woke, he just goes with a 30-year-old cat lady and 50-year-old, quote, pause women, unquote. And anything over that is apparently just like dead to him. And yet he's in his 60s. This is a very smart man, argue, who cannot figure out that women are not interested in helping. We climbed out of the muck all on our own, and now you guys get to spend the next century trying to do the same. This didn't happen overnight for women.
We're at a place where we are processing multi-generational trauma because we did the work. We finished the race. Now we have our heated blanket and our banana, and you guys are back at the starting line. Half of you didn't even read the email that told you where the starting line was, and you're still presenting us as the fix. Well, if he doesn't get his dumbstick touched, he might unalive you.
I did see a tweet from a woman who said, my husband said to me, I really feel better on the days I eat fruit. Were you not eating fruit? This is a newsflash to you?
What's fruit?
Scott Galloway might be smart about business things, or he might not. He might not be smart about anything. He might be decent about pointing out how society functions, but the fact that he's still so completely unaware that it's not our job to save his sex. You have sat down with so many women at this point. Even Katie Couric sat down and tried to break it down for you, and you were like, well, we can't isolate them. You guys isolated yourselves. If Scott is smart about anything, it's about producing meaningless sound bites that people will talk about on the internet. And we are falling into his trap.
Katie Couric is interviewing this man
out of this imaginary 80% thing that he made up.
Everyone says TikTok is dumb, but most of the content for this episode is from Natalie Garrett-Woodruff on TikTok. And this is her final point. Can we kidnap Scott Galloway and force him through like a months-long women's retreat where he constantly has to wear a period simulator? Every idea he shares is met with, as I was saying, because he's the prime example of somebody who thinks that they understand women. He sees a problem and he wants to fix it, and yet is incapable of onboarding the very feedback from the female sex about how simple it would be to just be back in our good graces. The people who say, oh my God, Scott Galloway, he's such a deep thinker, it's becoming more of a red flag to me than anything else.
I don't know if it can be said that he's a thinker. He is just repeating rhetoric that other people have given him and saying, why do women want to live this way? Why do you want to live without men?
The fight that I got into online with about 7 men was basically them telling me that Scott Galloway is great and I have no right to say anything because I'm not a man. I'm not willing to listen to a man with a marketing degree tell me about sociology. He doesn't have any experience. And he said, well, he's a father and he has kids. Yeah, that's not enough.
A lot of people have that, and they're still not therapists or psychologists or sociologists.
What Scott has is he met his wife at a hotel pool, who's 20 years his junior in her 30s, and he decided to impregnate her. And now he has 2 teen sons. He is seeing all the things that I have been seeing as a mother. I get it. I agree with a lot of the things that he's noticing, but his solve for the things is not right. Virginia, what are your final thoughts on Scott Galloway?
I usually thank you for bringing the topic to my attention, but I have to unthank you because this has made my life worse. I dislike another man on the internet. I'm full to bursting of disliking men on the internet. Scott Galloway is not a thought leader. He's not an intellectual. He's not a philosopher. He is an idiot. Idiots like him.
The thing I find that's funny about Scott Galloway is that he's had a lot of plastic surgery done and he's still really ugly.
I find that interesting about Elon Musk as well. He is a trillionaire and he is plug ugly. He's gone to every plastic surgeon in the world with a bag full of money and said, can you improve this? No, skinned fish is as good as we can get here.
When you're starting at a negative 10,000, what are you supposed to do?
Get clavicular on the phone.
I think clavicular looks super weird.
There's a Doctor Who character who is a stretched skin on a frame, and the caption was clavicular in the year 2052. Scott Galloway was a moron. None of these ideas have any merit, but he's attractive to a certain kind of man. Jeopardy is a show not for smart people, but for dumb people who want to feel smart. Scott Galloway is a speaker not for smart people, but for dumb people who want to feel smart. Those are my final thoughts. What are your final thoughts, Laura?
This was the comment that has gotten me lots and lots of hate on the internet. Scott is so close to getting the point, and then he misses it entirely.
He's saying the reason that women and men are not connecting is that women don't want what men are. Instead of the logical thing that men should try to improve, women should accept that men are always going to be crappy. No, thank you.
I don't think the solve is that women need to dim their light and just accept garbage. I think the solve is that men need to learn to rise to meet women and to make all of our lives better. Stop shooting up schools and stop being so violent and stop doing all this horrible, aggressive crap.
Stop solving all of your problems with violence.
Virginia, if someone doesn't want to swipe 1,000 times to try to get a coffee date will they be ghosted, but instead wants to go to a stand-up comedy show, how could they go about finding out more about you?
If I have published a stand-up comedy show on my website, I very rarely ghost. I will show up. You can find all of my dates on a calendar at my website, which is badinia.com, BADINIA.com. People used to have websites. Think of it as an early Substack or a late live journal. You can find me on Instagram at Badinia, and I wish you would. You can find more about our podcast by listening to it, and also on mysistersatherapist.com. If you have a question you'd like to ask us, a topic for the show maybe, you can write us at hello@mysistersatherapist.com. I'm going to say again that we would really, really love a review, and we will make you famous for 1 calendar week. If you have a product you would like us to promote that is preferably vegan, maybe a women-owned business owned by someone who's not a complete a-hole, please write us at hireus@mysistersatherapist.com. Laura, where can people find you on the internet should they wish to do so?
They can find me at my professional website, lauraryan.org. They can also find me at my semi-professional TikTok account. I am Laura Ryan. If you're interested in following the show on the internet, you can find us at our Instagram, which is My Sister's Therapist Instagram.
Here's a Scott Galloway quote that I agree with. We like to position education as the great leveler, but in fact, it has become a caste system, a means of passing privilege on to the next generation.
He says a lot of things that make sense to me, and that's why I find him so frustrating. We're on the same journey. We're moving in the same direction, and then he takes a quick left that goes somewhere that has absolutely nothing to do with anything.
It's kind of like the challenge of Dave Chappelle. He's such an amazing comic writer.
He's a very gifted comedian.
But as soon as he starts talking about women
or trans people,
it all goes to hell. And it's confusing because he's so amazing in so many other ways.
In both of their cases, they have a huge blind spot. And I doubt that either of them is going to go to therapy to figure that out.
I agree with this quote. There's only one real journey that matters. Who did you love and who loved you?
This is why I find him so frustrating. If he were just Jordan Petersoning the whole time, I'd be like, okay, let's throw him in the trash. But Scott Galloway does make some really, really good, solid points, but then his solution for the problem is completely wrong.
Here's an Instagram poem from the account Tinder Translators that comes up when you search Scott Galloway. Lonely young men is a phrase I hear a lot. Sometimes it is spoken like a threat. When young men are lonely, they are violent. They are dangerous, we are told. This is a crisis. It will be solved when the women open their legs. Aristophanes!
Euripides trousers? You mended these trousers.
Laura, now is the time of the podcast where sometimes you will read a nice review or a note that someone has sent us. Do you have something to share this week?
I certainly do. I have a YouTube review from Allison Dedeker. Thank you, Allison. This is from the episode Recenter Yourself. And she says, this episode spoke to me. I felt the sister's empathy for a similar experience. I can't say I've ever felt empathy from a podcast, but it was real. Thank you, gals. You touched my heart. Thank you, Allison.
You are a very special person to us. So mad about Scott Galloway.
Sorry for spoiling your day.
Laura, we do look to a man as our primary emotional support and founder, a very special man named Billy Ray Valentine Capricorn. And he used to say, we can make it, baby.
Me and you. Bye.